Hey y'all, welcome to What Could Go Wrong Live. I'm hanging out with Adriano and we're talking about curiosity over conformity, no, I had it right. Curiosity over conformity. That's the right one. And I'm super excited to jump into this conversation, but I'm going to let Adriano introduce himself and tell about all the cool stuff that he does in his really cool accent. So just prepare yourselves for that.
Well, Chelsea, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on What Could Go Wrong. I think that's the title of the show, isn't it?
It totally is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that you start off by saying y'all. That's such a I think a Texan kind of
saying.
I
mean, I have to be true to myself. That's just I say it 200 times a day, so I might as well.
I wouldn't want you to be anything else. So I apologize for all our North American viewers today who won't understand a word I'm saying because I'm speaking English. Yeah. I just thought I'd get that in there, Chelsea.
I asked for you. You're welcome.
I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia. We had to assist Chelsea previously on the atlas so that she could discover exactly where one of the most livable cities in the world actually is located.
It's not my fault. I couldn't understand what you were saying. Okay,
yeah,
but I got it the third time.
Just blame our accents for your lack of geography. Clearly, the American educational system is failing young people.
Why did I invite you here again? I'm so confused.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm really fortunate to be here. I'm a career educator. I've been in education now for 26 years, and I've been very fortunate and privileged to be a deputy principal and even acting principal at times across a variety of different independent and Catholic schools here in metropolitan Melbourne. And at the end of 2019, I decided to give that all up and undertake the audacious kind of hope of a school for tomorrow. And from that, we created, first of all, a podcast called Game Changers. So if you're listening out there, I encourage you to hop on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or SoundCloud. Check out Game Changers. We have, I think, about 70 episodes there where we're having conversations with people from across the world. We have an audience now in around 30 plus countries and have over 70,000 listens. So we're really excited about the reach. And I'm a partner in an organization, social or educational enterprise called A School for Tomorrow, which is a global network of students, teachers, school leaders that are working towards crafting a new learning ecosystem today for tomorrow's world.
You're so fancy. Like you've said all that before. Like
Yes, I actually have said that all before many times. Yes.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I actually got introduced to you through Relearn, through Learn Life, which was pretty cool. And I was excited to get to do a part of that. And then when you guys were like, hey, you should come and chat with us for this end of the day podcast, whatever, Game Changers mini thing with Trevor, I was like, the wrap up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get to hang out with like the famous people. So I absolutely will do that. Look at me.
I don't know how famous we really are. We were very fortunate that Learn Life, the organization in Barcelona and across the globe now, invited us to be their official podcast partner. So we came up with this idea of having a daily show in the mornings, and then we had a daily wrap-up show where we would just wax lyrical with, of course, the participants. And yes, we did encounter the great Chelsea, who provided really important insight about what learning could be today for the world in which our young people are going to inherit. But I think that's a nice little segue, Chelsea, to our topic today around curiosity, over conformity. We just said off air how disappointing it is that the United States has decided to continue with its standardized testing regime, or whatever you want to call it, during, because that's what it is, during during another wave of COVID. And I was reading an article here in Australia that was covering that particular story, where the argument was, well, we couldn't have a second year in a row without standardized tests. And I thought, are you serious? Are you really serious? And I've been on Clubhouse for the last couple of weeks listening to American educators going, oh, yes, we need this standardized testing because, you know, we can't afford them to lose another year of learning. And I've gone, are they really losing another year of learning? Like, where is there even evidence of that? You know,
I've yet to, well, I mean, they're quoting this conversation about, and I'm going to misrepresent it, but the big conversation is something about in previous spaces, there has been a time where there wasn't schooling in other countries, and then they were able to tie that to economic loss in the future. And so now they're coming back and saying, if we don't recover this learning, then we are heading for definite economic loss in the future because our kids won't know their times tables now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach because they are measuring what they're assuming young people are going to use or need in the future based on an old metric system, on a system that is measuring against an antiquated way of doing things. I mean, you know, I think we discussed in our wrap-up show that time at Relearn that the real pandemic across the globe, as we see it, as I see it in particular, is twofold. One is that mental health is particularly on the rise with young people and across the globe, and particularly in really well-developed countries like the United States, like Australia, like Canada and England and other parts of Europe, and we're seeing this rise, and that's a real pandemic. What's going on in our societies that young people have a hopelessness about their own kind of self and the way they see themselves in their future. The second component, of course, is that there is the great inequity around the digital divide. Right. And it's really, really clear that access to technology and the accessibility that can bring, that's creating the divide. Not a year off school. Yeah. It's about having a level playing field, you know, that everyone can access, because I can guarantee right now in my country, in your country, and in so many parts of the world, young people who have access to technology, who have access to bandwidth, you know, and the broadband or the internet, and have it in spades. Well, now they've got an edge, don't they? Because they're having that opportunity to access that and see that and open their minds to the possibility to remain curious in that space, where others that either through socioeconomic circumstance, either through their remoteness, or because they're a school that's in a regional or very remote area. I know in Australia we have a large Indigenous communities in very remote areas that wouldn't have access to that type of technology, which then doesn't set up a situation of equity. So we have real challenges in that space. But I suppose today we really want to talk about something a little bit more positive than that, don't we?
I mean, nothing that you have said is wrong, and you're completely accurate. And I'm loving to get to do some work to help close the digital divide in Texas. But I can't do anything about it for the whole world, as much as I would really, really love to do that. But you're absolutely right, because right now, so much of this whole remaining curious concept surrounds around what we can access through virtual learning, because there's so much limited amount of in-person learning. So if we're going to be curious, a lot of that curiosity is going to be expressed through digital devices, virtual learning, VR, et cetera, et cetera. And if we don't have that closure of this divide, then even the concept of remaining curious becomes more challenging.
Yeah, so I agree. And I though want to look at it from a slightly different approach. And that is, I want to focus perhaps part of this conversation, Chelsea, on our desired outcome. And that desired outcome is to help young people remain inherently curious, to tap into their natural curiosity as young people and focus on that, because the other stuff has system implications and that often is broader than perhaps just you and I and what our influence can be in shifting that. Because that becomes an operational conversation. I just want to talk about the ideal in many ways, you know. So I just want to share a quick little story with you. I remember when I was a kid, and when I was a kid, I had a balloon, and and I kind of accidentally let go of the string of that balloon, and I watched it just kind of float off into the sky until it disappeared. And although the moment was fleeting, I was kind of in awe of the adventure that that balloon was about to encounter, you know, and I kind of wondered where it would end up.
Yeah.
And then I, sitting here listening to you today and preparing for today's live conversation, I was reflecting further about how many young people have those moments of wonder and awe, where something has happened, you know, during their formative years, their young years, where they're just continually searching for this kind of great enlightenment about just wonder, you know. And being a visual arts teacher, so much of what I do allows people into that space and able to play in that space and be able to craft real world solutions, particularly on the design side of things, through a process of iteration and discovery, of trial, of error, of a new relationship with failure, and then synthesizing that through really good listening and empathy, and ultimately coming up with prototypes and solutions going forward. I just kind of feel that, you know, if we remain curious, I hope there's never like a hidden agenda behind that, because, you know, from my perspective, I simply seek to understand the perspective of others. And I'm always willing, you know, and I'm always willing to sit in that ambiguity, you know, and be open and curious without being invested in the outcome so much. It's kind of more largely around me wanting to understand cause and effect, and want to understand the world within me, and of course the world around me.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking process over product, right? I mean, that's kind of the concept. We're looking for the process of enjoying the perspective of others, or even the perspective of the object, right? The perspective of the balloon, or the perspective of other things that were going on, rather than what are we going to get out of this, which is a huge part of curiosity, is enjoying the perspective of all the pieces, of all the players. There's an interesting comment from Rebecca that I'm going to throw up here.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't doubt that there are many American educators that don't actually agree or believe in standardized testing, and I applaud that. I think that's awesome, because, you know, for me, the standardized testing campaign is the biggest dead-end approach to supporting young people in their growth and achievement. All it does is capture a moment in time. It doesn't give us the full picture and perspective of an individual in terms of the wholeness of their learning or the wholeness of their being. It doesn't give us a clear perspective of their character disposition or capabilities around various kind of attitude dispositions. And we have to continue to kind of cultivate a learning ecosystem that allows us to see the fullness of the individual, and also allows them to kind of flourish going forward. You know, standardized tests, I actually think, are even countercultural to equity, you know, because there are people who have access to support that enables them to perform better on that test than other people in our communities, particularly people in kind of poorer socioeconomic areas who don't have the financial wherewithal to get a tutor or someone to help them, you know, understand the tricks or of playing the game of the standardized test.
Well, but even aside from that, we're still talking learning differences. I mean, everyone has learning differences, so even the equity in those spaces is going to be different. So the ability to take the test in spite of your differences in learning, and if you have specialized tutoring or things like that for the test. I mean, so I agree that it is an inequitable and non-holistic approach to kind of assessing learning.
Yeah, I want to look at it from the lens of, now again, this kind of, I always like to approach things backwards, you know, understanding by design, you know, like trying to focus on what the desired outcome is. And I want to think about the world of work. And, you know, the future of work is upon us right now. You know, I mean, the future of work is already here. We're just all already late to it, you know, in many ways. You know, and so many of us are now being entrenched at home, and the world has kind of changed significantly as a result of this pandemic. I think this pandemic has highlighted so many things that is significant about our humanness. You know, and so getting back to work won't be getting back at all. It's kind of a new game that we're playing in, and the success in the future will require kind of new skills. And I was reflecting upon 8 types of skills that I believe that are going to form part of that future work skill way forward. The first for me is that we'll need an ability to deal with ambiguity.
Absolutely.
And get comfortable with not knowing what's ahead. That's
Right.
just the reality. The second for me is that the future will demand openness.
Yeah.
And the ability to engage in a civil discourse and a compromise where we seek diverse opinions and learning from diverse experiences. That diversity is our strength, not something that should separate us.
Right.
So ambiguity and openness for those first two. The third for me is around the constructs of entrepreneurship and empathy. This idea of tuning into the shifting needs of the market and deeply understanding and empathizing with the user's needs for a fuel for innovation. The fourth for me is that humans are nothing if not adaptable, but embracing shifts and bouncing forward, we will require new competencies. So enter the construct of resourcefulness, with being adaptive and flexible being the key to that idea of resourcefulness. The fifth for me is that inherently to move forward is the ability to believe in a positive future and focus on the possibilities through hope and optimism. Because I love the construct of hope. I think it provides us with a great optimism for what tomorrow could be, and it allows us to continue to dream and remain curious. The sixth for me is another new skill, will be this ability to build rapport and foster relationships and to build them quickly and from a distance. Like you're on another part of the world in a different time zone on a different day to what I am in Australia, but we're able to connect. You and I have been able to build a relationship over a period of time now through the use of social media platforms. And there's a real comfortableness and rapport between the two of us because we've been able to build that quickly and from a distance. And I think that's going to be an important skill for many people to thrive. The seventh for me is that the future will belong not to the cynics who sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
People who are prepared to get into the arena, and people of action and movement. I think that's what part of it is. And finally, curiosity. An unquenchable curiosity will rule the day, with an openness and a desire to learn and unlearn being central to this idea of remaining forever curious. And so, so hence why we kind of need a new social contract for schools moving forward, and we probably need a new social contract for society. It is frustrating to know that the kind of learning involved to pass standardized tests does not bolster students' sense of urgency or belonging, and there is little room for learning in that world. So
or relationship or any of those sense of value, sense of belonging, all those things are not built into this sense of standardized testing. But you use two words there that I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on. You use the concept of unlearning, which I'd love for you to kind of open up. And and we're talking about curiosity, and I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about what that looks like inside of an educational setting. Like if you were going to put curiosity into a classroom, what is kind of a tangible way you would look for that? So I'd love to kind of you break open those two things.
So that first one I feel is the most significant. And at a School for Tomorrow, we have 6 graduate outcomes, one of which is called, we've framed continuous learner and unlearner. And from our perspective, the adults in learning communities, or schools as the old vernacular, or even young people in those communities, we have to help them develop a love of learning about how to learn, not just about what to learn, so that they understand their place as this kind of continuous learner and unlearner throughout life. And that the reality is that with the advancements in technology, the advancements in AI, machine learning, that they are going to, that type of technology is going to continue to replace jobs that are rote or manual in many ways, or repetitive. So we have to think about, well, how are we going to remain relevant? And I think it's our humanness that's going to do it. And if we tap in then to our natural curiosity and wanting to constantly be open to the possibility of ourselves, of place and the other, then this notion of continuous learner and unlearner becomes our lifelong learning kind of paradigm. And that never seems to stop. And I suppose in some ways it's about, and you asked the question about what will it look like in a school setting. So from my perspective is that it all starts with the notion or a deep sense of belonging. If young people in our communities feel that they are seen, that they are known, that they are heard, and even loved, funny enough, irrespective of their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, their age, or their gender or non-binary or whatever it may be, if we are open to helping cultivate a deep sense of belonging, in my experience, we then start to see the development of students' intrinsic motivation to learn in a dynamically complex world. And if our schools,
saying that the learner becomes self-driven instead of having externally forced.
Well, that's right, because at the moment, I think a lot of education around the standardized and the one size fits all is an extrinsic motivation. It's to get a particular score, right? To get a GPA average, or in our context, it's the ATAR score. So that's an extrinsic motivation. Now, that has its place. I'm not denying that grades and stuff have a certain place in some form of extrinsic motivation, except what we're doing with young people is we're making them compete against one another in this unnatural environment. Now, I hope that we should be lifting every young person up and saying to every single young person that they are valuable, that they are known, and that they are loved. And we should be doing that from a place of equity. And I feel that when young people have that deep sense of belonging, what then happens is they are then in a complex world where they have a psychological safety to speak out, to talk, to use their agency. So that becomes their intrinsic motivation to want to grow, to want to advance themselves, and of course, make a positive contribution to society. Central, I believe, to this is the constellation of a human-centered, technology-enriched, people, place, practice conscious, and intentionally purposeful learning ecosystem that heroes meaning, belonging, and inclusion, and a deep connectedness to self, place, and the other, and leverages this idea of inherent curiosity. So if we had a scenario in a class where we know that it's important that young people develop mastery and proficiency around, say, literacy and numeracy, we know that. And we also know that many of our subjects that we offer bring great value to young people in terms of knowledge base and skills. I'm not dismissing the value of that. It's not an either or argument here about knowledge versus self-determination. But if we start off with mastery and we help them cultivate their deep understanding of the knowledge and skills in their learning area, or in I think you use the word subjects in your country, if we then take that and create learning opportunities within every course that we offer, where they can transfer that learning and that knowledge to a real world context, to a context that is relevant to them, that is a context that is about a social change or the advancement of humans or a human endeavor type of construct, and allow us to trust in these young people and their capacity to work their way through these wicked solutions through a really good structured process of, say, design thinking or a framework like that. I can ultimately see that young people will then inherently remain curious. We have to support them, of course, along that way on building their skills around self-regulation and self-efficacy, good goal setting and resetting of goals, all those type of fundamental things that will give them the executive functioning that they're going to need to be able to then flourish going forward. But the crucial component, as I come back to what I said at the very beginning here, is that in the absence of them having a deep sense of belonging, then they won't have the psychological safety in that environment to take the risks that are needed.
Absolutely. I mean, psychological safety is primary, right? I mean, we're talking about, we talk a lot about building a trauma-informed environment, which is kind of the same thing, right? How do you create psychological safety? And one of my main soapbox that all my other soapboxes stack up on, because I have a pyramid of soapboxes, right? And I just consistently live up somewhere on the top of them. But they all live on the basis of everything stems from a foundation of relationship. And if you don't have a foundation of relationship, then you don't have what you need to move forward in the way that you need to move forward. I mean, without relationship, you can't build these other things that you're talking about and really move those forward in a sustainable manner that allows that student to really propel themselves forward. And that co-constructivism that comes with that, right? Coming alongside them as a moderator and a facilitator rather than trying to pull them forward. We can just come alongside them and let them move forward on their own. And you posted something a couple days ago, I want to say, about the future of education is, and it was something like, the future of education is that we don't know what the future is. And so we're going to come alongside the learners and build it with them. And
Correct.
I love that. The future is we don't know. I mean, the future is we're coming alongside them to do it. We can no longer say we know where you're going, so let us tell you the path that to get there, and here's what it's going to look like when you get there, because things are moving too rapidly to get to that point. And so that's my theory on where curiosity really comes into play for the learner and for the facilitator, the moderator, the educator.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many of us that think that we're just going to shape the future for them.
Right.
I think that's just a nonsense. Like, it's their future.
Yeah.
Let them shape it. And you know what? As we age, we're going to need them.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're definitely going to.
Than others, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to be inappropriate then, but I won't. Okay. Yeah. You're right. And so I always think about this, that throughout the primary school years and secondary school years, what's the phrasing that you use? You use it, is it elementary school?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, elementary, and then you have high school, right?
Right.
Yeah. So ours is primary school and then secondary school. And so same. And the way I look at it is that we start off supporting these young people in many ways being the author of their story earlier on. I would hope that throughout elementary school, as they navigate each year, they become the co-authors of their own story. Mm-hmm. And then I would hope that once they get to high school, some might take a little longer than others, and that's fine. But hopefully when they get to high school, they become the authors of their own story.
Yeah.
But I have a strong sense that so much of our high school structure, this one size fits all, tries to kind of bang out of them their creativity and their curiosity, and to bang out of them this kind of collaboration, communication, because it's all kind of narrowed towards a score. Right. This arbitrary score for a moment in time that has not a lot of value post that. If I start thinking about what's happening in your country with many of your leading universities, so many of them are now looking at multiple entry points for admissions into their universities. Mm-hmm. I also am looking at the universities and seeing the exponential rise of online learning offerings. Like I'm in Australia right now, and I can complete a course at Harvard University online for a period of time, and I will have a Harvard qualification.
Right.
Now, the beauty of it is it's a micro-credential qualification that enables me to do lots of those, and eventually that forms into a degree.
Right.
So even the universities in the United States and across the globe are realizing that their model has been broken for a while, that their era of dominating is not going to be the same, and that people are looking for learning anytime, anywhere, by anyone. And there's a power in that. There's a great equity in that, because providing you have the financial wherewithal to do it, and that's the equity question, of course, and then the access to the technology, you can fundamentally tap into this learning and grow. Now,
are you saying learning can happen outside of a classroom?
What a phenomenal concept that would be.
I just can't. Whoa now. Too much.
Well, too much. Well, Chelsea, that us at School for Tomorrow, we believe that anytime, anywhere learning means online, on campus, in context, and in country. Mm. So yes, an on-campus learning experience has value, because if we learn anything about that from COVID-19 is that people matter, right? And that schools, for me, schools don't exist just as places of learning. They are important social institutions that help cultivate character formation and apprenticeship and social development and all those things that are really dear about the power of community, that we can leverage.
Absolutely. Right.
But what we're also learning, particularly here in Australia, I mean, in Victoria, we were in a remote learning paradigm for 114 consecutive days.
Wow.
Okay, so we're coming from a position of real authority on this,
Right,
and what started off, I reckon, as remote teaching, the teacher getting on Zoom and telling the class what to do. It slowly progressed into remote learning, where we moved away from the synchronous kind of paradigm to a more asynchronous paradigm, or a nice blend between the two.
Right.
You know, the synchronous was ideal for the acquisition of mastery of knowledge and skills of your learning area, but then the asynchronous allowed them for that transfer, that application of that knowledge and skill for real world kind of context, and just trusted in them. And so when we're seeing that rise and that keep evolving, I remain really optimistic about what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you throw in the opportunity for an in-context experience, I'm going to give you an example. I'm currently working with an organization here in Australia. They're a leading video and film production company. Oh, cool. And they do a lot of, commercial advertisements for television and film. They do a lot of short films for festivals, for television, for clients with products and so on. Now, they have access to some of the best and most noted film directors, cinematographers, script writers, you name it in that industry, they have access to it. They've come to me and said, Adriano, what about we create a 1-week immersion experience for young people at the year 10 level? I'm not sure what that's the equivalent of in the United States. It might be year 10. So Sophomore, okay, yep, sophomore year, the equivalent of that. So normally in Australia, that's the year that a lot of our students, because they're 15 or 16, go off to do some form of work experience.
Okay.
But a lot of them cheat that work experience because they just go into wherever they're doing their part-time job,
Right, yeah.
Right, yeah. Anyway, so what these guys are offering is a 1-week immersive experience where you're working alongside some of the best creative thinkers in that industry. And you're going to actually start a project on the Monday and you're going to finish it on the Friday and have an actual portfolio at the end of it. And they're saying, well, here is an in-context thing. We're going to be able to measure the Australian curriculum's achievement standards around media and visual arts. We're going to be able to expose them and give them insights to industry knowledge. Mm-hmm. And the third is we're going to give them insight to the necessary employability skills to thrive in that industry.
Right. In real time. In real time.
Right. And so the way I look at it is, well, then why couldn't that immersive experience, why couldn't the schools partner with this organization who are going to facilitate this for you? Why couldn't that be one of the courses that young people undertake?
Yeah. Right.
Because you're in context and you're learning by doing.
Right. Which is experiential learning, right? It's a beautiful form of learning that we can all and what a great way to kind of pique curiosity and push that forward is to kind of give you a chance to test the waters or be a part of that thing. So I wonder in a context such as that, what is it like to have curiosity, not only as a learner, but as the educator, as the facilitator, right? Isn't that equally as important for the flip side of the coin, to have curiosity as it is for the learner to have curiosity?
I think that an educator that remains static and not open to their own possibility and their own continual growth. I know this is provocative, but I think they should get out of the profession.
I agree.
And because what I know now at 48 years of age, I didn't know when I was 10,
right,
or 20 or 30, and I keep evolving as an educator, as a leader, and as a human. And I keep evolving because I am open to not only my possibility, but the possibility of place and the others. And every person that I encounter, I learn something from. That includes the young people that I've nurtured over that time, as well as the adults that I work alongside of. Mm-hmm. And I need to be modeling this curiosity, and I need to be this continuous learner and unlearner, not just the future builder, not just the solution architect, not the team creator. I need to be this person who's prepared to live in this space of constant curiosity and being open to it. I'll give you an example. I remember a number of years ago, we had a young man at a school that I was at, the deputy principal of. I finished there at the end of 2019, and it's an independent Catholic boys' school. It's in a very affluent area of Melbourne, so it holds a certain prestige within the community. And this young man had come to us at the beginning of year 10. He is part Australian and part from the Solomon Islands. So you can appreciate that a person who'd lived most of their formative years on a Pacific island coming to Australia. There's a bit of a cultural shock, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
But this young man, there was something quite unique and special about him. And he immersed himself pretty quickly into the life of the school. He participated in the school's rugby program and the visual arts program and so on. I got to know him a little bit better because we did an immersion experience to Italy, a visual arts and language tour for 3 weeks. And you know, I was the visual arts teacher on that tour with the students as well. And then he became the college captain. You know, I don't know what you call it in your schooling system, like do you have prefects or what do you call like
I mean, there's prefects in Harry Potter. I know that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have like a head student in your schools?
I don't think so. Not
like
that
is there a school president?
Oh,
student
I mean,
president?
like the student council, they have a student body president.
Yeah.
Okay. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. So in our context, if you're appointed the college captain or the college vice captain, that's a seriously big deal, right? You're like the principal of the students, and yeah, and so what I can explain to that anyway. So he and I had a conversation one day. He came to me and he said, Mr. Di Prato, we at the beginning of all of our assemblies, we recognise Indigenous Australians through a small little kind of acknowledgement of country. Now, he was so polite, he didn't use this word, but he basically was implying that what we say is pretty pithy and just tokenistic.
Okay.
That it wasn't really honouring
right.
Indigenous sisters and brothers. And I went away and reflected upon that. And here I'm thinking that I am a very woke educator, someone who is open to the inherent possibility of our Indigenous sisters and brothers in this country.
Kudos to your use of the word woke.
Thank you. And so I thought that's who I was. But then I took stock and I realised that what this young man was saying to me was that although I was giving it space, it didn't feel authentic.
Yeah.
So with him and the student body, we went off and started working with the local Wurundjeri tribal council. So it's the local Indigenous people of the area of Melbourne. And we started working with them in crafting an appropriate acknowledgement of country that was authentic. And that is something that has not only their imprimatur on it, but of course their elders and the people who had gone before them.
Yeah.
And then from that, we developed an Indigenous kind of awareness week. We had a couple of our houses because we had like a house system at that particular school. They developed the playing kits for all the different sporting teams with Indigenous motifs, working with Indigenous elders to create those. And then we developed an Indigenous garden that actually told the story of the Wurundjeri people and their 65,000 year history. I mean, it's the oldest living civilization in the world,
That's crazy.
And so we went from it being a nice gesture and polite to being embedded in our culture. And why I'm sharing that with you is that I had a young person help enlighten me and help me see what real inclusion looks like. Right. And that it went from just this felt, I got to say, it was just tokenistic.
Yeah.
I didn't feel it at the time. I felt that it was real. And I came from a place of genuineness towards it.
Yeah.
But it was tokenistic because it wasn't about what I felt about it. It was about what they felt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so once we created this deep sense of belonging, we had a number of Indigenous students at that school. And can I tell you, they wrote me the most eloquent letters of saying thank you for the first time for someone allowing us to be seen.
I love that.
And I don't care if it's just one or two people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of my growth now. So now I will enter every type of dialogue or meeting with someone with a different level of consciousness. And that keeps my curiosity alive, Right.
Yeah. I mean, your curiosity is what led you to continue that conversation and figure it out and move forward. And I think that's a beautiful picture of what it means to have curiosity as an educator. It's more than just about the academics and what we're teaching in the classroom, what they're exploring in STEM or in art or whatever, but also what they're exploring in a holistic manner. It's so much bigger than just that one piece. And so switching from this concept of curiosity, I'd like to kind of switch gears into this concept of conformity. So if we now have an understanding of what curiosity can look like, what does it look like to be a conformist or to function under this this idea of conformity?
Yeah, look, I might get myself into a bit of trouble now.
That's okay. That's what this show is all about. Did you not? You
Yeah.
forgot the title, right?
Yeah. I understand. So much, I believe, of a one-size-fits-all educational system, an industrial model that's been with us, for 60 plus years,
right,
has always been from the construct of conformity.
Oh, absolutely.
And compliance. And it was about producing students who could then enter into society and contribute to the economics of a society.
Right.
The challenge, of course, I have with that is that has its place, because we all should be contributing to society, but our contribution to society shouldn't be one that is simply about a monetary or financial gain.
Right.
It's got to be a bit more altruistic than that, and it has to include our intrinsic humanness, our deep humanness, about the fact that we exist because of each other, not in spite of one another.
Right.
And how we can continue to find opportunities to break down that conformity. I'm going to try and find this quote. If you want to pad a little bit there for me, Chelsea, I'm going to try and find this quote.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about, it's more than just the economic value that you'll bring in the end. A lot of the big conversations that I've heard in this whole push for standardized testing is the studies that have been done on previous versions of, this loss of learning, where the students that leave, you can't ever gain back this loss. And then it ends up negatively impacting the economy for years to come, right? And you don't ever recover from it. And so I like to challenge that with the concept of, are we only looking at the value that these kiddos are taking out with them as the value that they'll bring into the economy financially, or are we looking at the holistic value? So the study that we're looking at and saying we need to do standardized testing because of this study and the impact it had on the economy, are we also saying, well, I want to know what's the information on how were those children social emotionally? Where were they in their relationships, in their collaborations, in their family life, in their personal lives? What did that look like, regardless of whether or not they were submitting financially to the economy the way that we had expected them to, or the way that maybe less than the previous generation? I want to know where they were holistically in a bigger picture. And I think that takes the concept of this argument of we need to make sure we care for our economy by providing standardized testing to a whole different, like, I'd like more information, please, level.
Yeah. I'll explore a response in this way. And I have many American friends that I've developed over the years, and during this COVID pandemic, I have been genuinely concerned and worried about their well-being. I live in a country that made a decision that its response to COVID was going to be from a health position, that people matter and that wellness comes first. We have one of the lowest death rates of COVID in the world. Right now, we have across the country probably less than 10 people that actually have COVID. Like look, I know we're only a small population of 26 million compared to the United States. However, our approach was different, right? Our approach was never an economic one. It's become an economic one now because we want to get people back, but it was always about an approach that focused on wellness. If I think about countries like New Zealand, Taiwan, Finland, Estonia, some of these other countries that have been really successful in managing the COVID outbreak, they approached it from the position of wellness first. And if we continue to operate our society from the construct of purely economics, all we're going to do is create a bigger divide between the haves and have-nots. If we create a new social contract for schools and society, one that positions wellness at the center of our thinking, a deep consciousness of making wellness come first where people matter, then there is a greater chance of greater prosperity. Because if you're not well, you're no good to anyone. And if you are well, it leads to really good, rich learning opportunities. Whether it's physical wellness, spiritual wellness, mental health wellness. cultural wellness, all those type of things and awareness that are really important. So when it comes to this point of conformity, do we just simply continue to do what we've always done because it's what we know and that's the status quo and it's comfortable?
So well.
It has, well, I would argue that it hasn't. That's the thing, right?
That's what I mean.
I think that's your point. Yeah, sorry. That's your point. And so do we continue down that path, or do we go down the conversation path of saying, what about just a novel idea that instead of a few flourishing in life, what about we work towards spreading that love, inviting the diversity to the table, and being open to the possibility of every single person around that table and giving them real voice and agency, and that we co-produce and shape a future of tomorrow that we want our children to inherit and to thrive in.
Right.
And include them, the children, as part of being part of the architects.
Give them a seat at the table.
To shape this new world. I mean, I'm no expert on American politics, but from afar, your politics is always in our newspapers, and it was for 4 years under the previous president. Yeah, it's actually been really quiet the last few months. We haven't had a lot of American stuff in our press.
What are you
lately.
even talking about in your newspapers anymore?
Well, we are, but what we're hearing now is someone say we're going to join the Paris Accord. We're going to look at LGBTQI rights about certain things. We're looking at how we can continue to support people financially during this crisis. We're looking at how we're going to roll out. Like we're hearing a different message now.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
A
message of aspiration of what it could be. And can I say that has always been the attraction of the United States for us around the world. The attraction has always been, here is this dynamic country that has always been about an aspiration of what could be. Yeah. And I think that's been the appeal. That's been the allure. I've been to New York City now, 6 or 7 times because of that type of allure. And I love it. I love the energy, and I love the aspiration of that. And I wonder. I mean, that's simple and complex. I get it. Right. But I just wonder.
Recognizing the simplicity and the complexity.
Yeah. Like it's massive. But I just feel that you guys are coming out of a real division, for the last 4. Like it's been really amplified. It's been very divisive, and people are holding on to what they think are the good old days. I don't think they're all that good. I don't think they were all that good. Ask an African American if they thought it was all that good. Ask an Indigenous Australian if they thought that was all good. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they'd agree that was good.
It's a little romanticized by certain parties, and I just don't know that it's quite as lovely as we're the stories that are being told.
And I suppose what I'm really agitating for here is that conformity has a place when you're manufacturing a car.
Right.
Because you want to make sure that every safety component in that vehicle is consistently the same. So that it doesn't matter who buys that vehicle, they're getting the product that's going to ensure that they're safe. That's where I want conformity,
Absolutely. I want my airbags to work every single time.
Exactly. But do I want conformity when dealing with humans? Do I want some civility, and do I want some order? Sure, of course I want that, because I want us to coexist in a society that we feel safe in. But at the same time, I think we should be able to have robust conversations without it being personalized, where we're arguing the point, not the person, and that conformity, unfortunately, in an educational system, will continue to perpetuate the divide between the haves and have-nots. And until we move to a paradigm where curiosity is at the heart of a personalized learning structure or a human-centered learning structure, we're never going to shift out of the murkiness of what we're living in right now.
Right.
I had this is the quote. This is a quote from a gentleman by the name of Benson Salo. Benson Salo is an Indigenous Australian, and he happens to be the very first ever Indigenous Australian appointed to be the Consulate General in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he started this year. I think he's based in Houston or Chicago, one of the two. Can't remember. Yeah, we interviewed him. We interviewed him on Game Changers, and but we asked him about this question around. We were exploring questions similar to what we're talking about today. You know, diversity, conformity, and so on. And he describes himself as a disciplined non-conformist, which that's really interesting. You know.
Yeah.
And he wants to kind of start bending the arc towards stepping into the uncertainty and trusting in our muscle memory and living our lives from whole hearts. I love that. I love that notion. Right, yeah. It's a very Brene Brown, right?
Right. Oh, very, very, very,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Who I absolutely adore. I love her.
Yes.
But he had this quote. He said, this is what, when we asked him about diversity, he said, diversity is being invited to the dance, but inclusion is being invited to dance.
I love that. Yeah.
And I love that when I read that, because it's a bit like that example I gave you before about the story that I had about the acknowledgement of country for Indigenous. Well, I thought I was acknowledging diversity because I was doing it.
Yeah.
But
you could check that box. I mean, if you have it on, if you look at the accreditation review or whatever, you're like, check, I got that box.
But true inclusion was inviting them to do it.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And
I love that.
Not me assuming the responsibility of that.
Seat at the table. I mean, I think that's what it comes back to, is having a strong enough relationship to allow whatever, the student, the learner, whatever we're talking about, a seat at the table. I mean, I think that's a huge part of all of these conversations and all of these topics.
Yeah, look, I just think that we owe it to ourselves to cast aside the mundane and the ordinary.
I agree, because what could go wrong? Ha! See what you set me up for there? Like, that was perfect. We didn't even plan that.
That's right, and you know, and yeah, that's right. And curiosity for me remains the central kind of part of the process of learning, and the kind of human desire to acquire new knowledge, to understand and develop skills, and it kind of keeps our brain stimulated and helps our mind to remain active. You know, and I feel that we can feel more relevant, you know.
Right.
I've got a question for you though, Chelsea.
Oh, that's not how it works. I did not agree to that type of make it easy.
Well, I'm not conforming, you see.
I see.
So my question to you is, how do you quench your thirst for curiosity?
Oh, quench is an interesting word, because it's never quite, I am a constant learner, unlearner. Like, I just love to take it in and then push it back out. And honestly, this live show was one way that I'm able to kind of bring it in and push it back out at the same time, because I love these conversations. But it's just talking with people and getting other perspectives. I love perspectives outside my own. And I think that is the biggest way that I can figure out what's happening and what's next and what else is going on, because I was raised personally in a very closed off perspective. It was a very religious background. And so it was very closed. And even when I lived in Honduras and did these other things and taught internationally, I was still from this kind of same framework. And so honestly, the biggest way that I was able to shift this perspective outwards was to start asking questions and and instead of saying that's not how we do it, or that's not how you should do it, or here's how you should do it, the question is, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about why you do it that way, or how you do it that way? And that is my favorite part. That's what I love about this whole curiosity concept, is instead of assuming one person knows the answer, it's then asking for more information about how you do it. It doesn't mean that I may agree with what you're doing or how you're doing it, but I just want to understand or have a conversation about it, because I respect the other human enough to engage in that. And I would hope that they respect me in that same way. And for me, it's a huge divide, because of how I was raised versus how I'm interacting now. And I love this side so much more. It's a beautiful thing to be able to say, how interesting, can you tell me more about that? And that was kind of the basis for why I love the show that I get to do now, is I get to talk to people about it all the time.
I don't know what that faith experience was, or religious kind of denomination it was for you, but I'm a person of faith. I'm a Catholic, and it's interesting because from my perspective, you see, I interpret my faith quite differently often to the conformity of the church or to many people in the faith, because I look at it as keeping the dangerous memory of Jesus alive, because I think that he was, I actually think he was one of our greatest disruptors ever.
Right. Agreed.
I mean, if you want a model of disruption, there you have it. I mean, he was a person that went to the margins and made them feel seen.
Right.
You know, think about the Samaritan story, or, you know, all those type of things. And so, you know, in John, he talks about, you know, the coming to the fullness of life, you know, and then you have life. And so I look at someone like him, and I interpret my faith from the aspiration of a gospel, which is about love, which is about compassion, which is about forgiveness. And if I keep operating from those constructs, then I'm always going to be open to the possibility of you, of someone else, and of places that I encounter, you know. And so I look to someone like him as a person of deep wisdom and ahead of his time, because, you know, he was crucified literally for his beliefs in disrupting the norm of thinking.
And I agree. And I totally agree with all of that. And I think where something went off the rails for me was not in who Jesus is and who God is and what that means. It is then the interpretation and the legalism placed on by the humans in that story. And that
the institutionalized religion.
Yes. The conformity of this is what we believe being said, and here's the standardized test that goes with your religion. You know, that concept. That was that was the issue for me in that, and where you didn't ask questions. You didn't say, that's interesting, can you tell me more about why you do that? Instead, you said, what you're doing is wrong and here's why. And that's a different narrative.
I often wonder if he was to be alive today and walk into some of our cathedrals and go, are you serious? Look at this opulence, you know, look at this excess. I don't think this was my aspiration, you know. Anyway, you know, I'm conscious of time, and I know we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, but I just wanted to share with you one final thing, is that we all know that curiosity and kind of travel can go hand in hand, and that is hardly kind of a new revelation, but for me, globetrotting has always been the pursuit of the adventurous, of the intrepid, and of course of the curious. And personally, I kind of like to live a life in the rapture of that fascination, you know, right deep into that fascination of discovery, because I like to live in wonder and in encounters of moments of aha and awe, or moments of simple mystery, or moments that take your breath away. And every time I've had the good fortune to be able to explore many parts of this planet, I come away more enriched, more enlightened, and more open to the possibility of what we could be as a society. And then I think to myself, why aren't more people seeing these people in Chichicastenango in Guatemala? Why aren't more people experiencing these African people that then invited me to their home in a township in South Africa? Why aren't more people, you know, meeting this wonderful Turkish family in Cappadocia, Turkey, you know, who have opened up their homes and shared their meal with me and taught me about their history and their place and why they exist? Why are more people encountering the possibility of each other and the mystery that is born from that, and the gifts that come from that? Because it keeps coming back to that saying I said to you earlier, that, you know, we exist because of each other. And that's what keeps me curious all the time, and why I think psychologically it will always be greater than conformity. Conformity is a social construct designed for us to comply and and to follow certain ways of doing things and be conditioned. And is there a place for some of that? Sure. But it should never replace our inherent humanness of wanting to discover. I mean, humans are aspirational, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and I think the cool thing about travel is you're doing the exact thing we talked about. You're shifting your perspective. You're getting out of where you know and where you understand, and you're shifting your perspective into something else. And this whole concept, and I just think that lives right there somewhere in my pyramid of soapboxes, and we could just go down 17 different rabbit trails, because I have soapboxes that we could just throw, and I know that you have a pyramid of soapboxes, and we could just chunk them for days and days. But I've loved this conversation because the just the concept of curiosity and this concept of conformity is so much bigger than the classroom or the school or the academic endeavors or the this or the that. I mean, it's a holistic, experiential type concept that applies to every person inside of the learning community, not just are you curious in your STEM or are you conformed in your testing. I mean, it's a huge concept that covers so many different things, and I love these conversations that have this broad cover, and you can just kind of keep uncovering new pieces of it every time you have a different piece, and you're like, oh, that relates back to this and that relates back to that. And I love those things that are the interwebs of the things like this.
Yeah, because so much of our conversation has really focused on an ecosystem, and in an ecosystem everything is interdependent, and if we're serious about what schools today should look like for tomorrow's world, they need to be schools that are outward in their perspective, not inward and not insular. Right. They need to be schools that are open to including community, including business, including partnerships, including parents who are the primary educators of their children.
Did you say including parents?
Yes. Well, yes. You
are just we're not gonna let you talk anymore. Like, you're just blowing things up now.
Yeah. So imagine if we include the universities and the different organisations, if we included business partners and community organisations in our schools, and that our schools, were an extension or a function of that community and that local community to help leverage everyone's possibility, not just the possibility of the young people and the adults that are in their lives. And that's what a true ecosystem looks like. Right. And we're in an age where we have to be deeply conscious. I use the word ecosystem deliberately because it has connotations to planet, right? And we're in an age where we have to be super conscious of our place in this planet. We've got to stop living as if we don't coexist with the planet.
Right. Yeah.
And we've got to stop living. We've got to stop living as if we're not part of it. We're bloody part of it. And it's time that it's time that we realize that we're part of it, and so we have to work with it, not drill it for our own prosperity.
And that's a whole nother soapbox that you've.
Anyway, I'm going to stop talking.
Well, I really have loved this conversation, and if you're catching it live, thank you for being here. Just a side note, if you don't comment, I can't tell that you're here. I have people that tell me all the time, like, hey, I was there, did you see me? No, I didn't. I have no secret roster of who's here. So if you don't comment, I don't know that you're here. And if you're catching it on the replay, thanks for hanging out. Be sure to check out Adriano. Where can we find you, dude? Where should we find you?
Well, you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, that's a pretty easy place. And considering that you've posted me all over your LinkedIn, you can definitely go just to your LinkedIn and find a link. I'm also on Twitter at Adriano Di Prato. I strongly encourage everyone listening to hop on to the Game Changers podcast. The Game Changers podcast is Phil Cummings and myself as the hosts. We're not the Game Changers. Our guests are the Game Changers. Or you can Google www.ataschoolfortomorrow.com and check out what we do in our global network.
I convinced Phil to come and do the shenanigan with me later too, right?
Really? I mean, wow. Imagine talking to a history teacher. That'll be as boring as batshit.
It'll be fine. No, I'll just sneak you in, right? I'll be like, hey, here's a guest code. Just kind of jump in there with us and it'll be fine.
That'll be cool. Don't tell him I'm coming though.
Oh, well, he won't watch this. It's fine. So definitely check out Adriano. I love what he does. Definitely check out his podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the replay. Be sure to check out my YouTube channel for the previous episodes of the people and all the other shenanigans. So we'll see you guys next week. Have an awesome evening / day / whatever day it is, wherever you are. Bye.
We're a day ahead, Friday.
Oh, right. Yeah.